Hey guys, Martin here bringing you another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video, and so it has been a while since we've done a tier list for the top 10 TURs. In fact, I'm not even sure when I did the last LR one. I think it was after part 2 of the worldwide, so there haven't been any big LR releases since then. But yeah, I did not do one after Roshi came out. I didn't do one after Scout of Vegeta came out because I didn't think he really impacted like the top 10 list all that much anyway. And then I skipped Roshi, so I didn't do one then. I have used him a little bit as a friend for various teams on missions and stuff like that. But with SLUG coming out and actually being a very good, very impressive TUR, I thought that we would go ahead and take a look here. Now, obviously, I always say in these tier lists, I market them as like, you know, I do my top 10 list based on global because I don't really like to rate units that I haven't used. I don't rate them based off of just watching other people's showcases. I like to build teams, try out the unit myself, see how I feel about them. So obviously there are going to be some placements on this list, and I will talk about when we get to them, where I have not used the units as much as other units, and so I am obviously open to any sort of opinions you guys have in discussion about the placements for certain characters. I mean, I am in general anyway, right? Like I say this on all of my tier lists because inevitably tier lists, whether they're videos or posts on Twitter or something, always get comments of people saying like, oh, I can't believe he put this guy here instead of this guy. And it's like, I try and explain my thought process in the video, but as I very often say in these videos, if two units are like right next to each other, like say 5 and 6 as an example, if you wanted to switch them around, I probably wouldn't have that much of an argument, right? When you're making a 1 to 10 list rather than doing tiers, it's a bit more difficult because some units will be better in some content than others. So it can always be a little bit hit or miss in where exactly a unit should place when related to another unit. And like I say, units that are at least close to each other, I would not really have any issue with switching around, right? Like now, if you want to say like the one that I think is number 10 should actually be number 1, then we could certainly have an interesting discussion about that one. But yeah, if the units are like right next to each other, like I said, 5 and 6, 2 and 3, even like 1 and 2, I probably wouldn't have that much of an argument because I've already put those units so close together on the list anyway. And very often there's only one minor thing that puts one unit over the other unit. So, but anyway, I don't have to specify as much, I guess, anymore. Although probably never again now that the tier list is specifically for global, because global is only missing LR Jiren now in terms of units, which means as we are only doing Dokkan Fest TURs, Easy A's excluded, every one that will be potentially, like every potential unit that could be on the list is out on both versions at the same time. So I guess technically this list does apply to JP, although I would say, again, because it's based on my experience with the units, then obviously being a global player, I don't have like the Goku and Frieza stage, for example. So if you think a unit should be higher up on the list because they're good against Goku and Frieza, that's obviously something that isn't really taken into account in this list. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. I'm going to try not to keep it too long, but yeah, we're going to jump in straight away. So we're actually not starting at number 10, or I guess we're kind of starting at maybe a joint number 10. I couldn't really decide. I thought this guy should get an honorable mention because he could be at 10. Like some people might think he's better than the unit I put at 10. I honestly am not sure. He might be better than the unit I put at 10. I couldn't decide. So I thought I'd give this guy an honorable mention, the Frieza. Frieza is a unit that can be good and can be fun to use. Big damage numbers. His team, not the best, although it's had some good buffs. His design on release, it was a little bit odd with the way his leader skill works and then needing characters of another category that isn't part of his own 170, although there is a lot of crossover with the characters that are on his leader skill. It was a little bit awkward, but some other units have come out that are decent buffs for him. And he is a fun unit. Like he's like a newer TUR version of the LR Cooler, right? Where on his best turns, this guy's dropping like multiple high numbered attack stats, has an active skill that can do tons of damage. If he does a bunch of supers in one turn, his raw defense is good enough for tanking normals. It's just one of those things where he will get blasted by a super, but as I always talk about and have done for years, units have specific roles, and if a unit is there on the team to be a massive damage dealer, just dropping loads of damage, you shouldn't be expecting those units to then also tank like the hardest attacks in the game, right? Because they're not tanks. their damage dealers. So Frieza is either at number 10 or at least doesn't quite make the cut, which I guess would put him at 11. But the funny thing is, the unit that I'm going to put at number 10, and I don't know if people would disagree, I don't know if I'm over-hating this guy. Maybe it's like the huge feeling of disappointment after everything we got during the worldwide celebration, I don't know. But I am putting the Scout of Vegeta at number 10. Now, that means that there are a couple of units that I'm sure you guys can already think of that must be above this guy on the list that maybe you are already thinking, wait, what? You think those guys are better than Vegeta, but Vegeta I just think is terrible. He has unnecessary restrictions in his passive, like the cap, making him a nuking unit and then capping the amount of like stats he can get, even though 10 orbs is not exactly something you're going to be getting every turn, or 10 plus orbs, right? Because 10 orbs is the maximum. And then you give him like this random ability. It's not even based on when you're on low health, which could be useful to save you with like the heal. Is once he's done a certain number of attacks, he changes the entire orb field to AGL, but then he doesn't get the buff from all of those orbs, which means the only thing you really benefit from is you get extra healing. But like, why does he not just get that massive buff for that one turn? It's only a one time only change the entire orb field. And that would maybe put him like a couple of places up the list, maybe not even a couple of places, but like that wouldn't suddenly make him in the top 3 if he didn't have a cap on that percentage. But it just makes him so much worse. His team is not great. His celebration gave us some buffs for Namek Saga, but it's not like by the end of his celebration that team was a top competitive, like upper tier in the meta kind of team. And of course he suffers the same issue as like Broly's, where he's an extreme character but he's a Saiyan, so his links don't work super well on teams with other extreme units. And him being the first Inhuman Deeds like 170 Dokkan Fest leader as a character that doesn't link well with a ton of other characters on that category, I think is just hugely disappointing. So he is at number 10 for me. So next up we have Hirudegarn. Now this guy, he is a very RNG related unit. It's one of those things where you could, in your experience, have this guy, use him in a bunch of different events. He just always dodges everything all the time. He can do some pretty good attack stats once he's transformed. So if that's your experience with him, you could consider him to be higher on the list, which I think is just one of those things when it comes to units solely based on RNG. I did like him when he came out. I got quite lucky, like in my initial summons, I got 2 dupes of him. He does drop some big attack numbers, but I certainly feel like I get very unlucky with his dodging sometimes. And there are events now, especially with some of the teams that he's on, like he was an interesting choice for the Frieza team, right, when Frieza came out. But there are teams that he's on where he'll be required to be doing some, well, I say tanking because obviously his defense is based on dodging, but he'll be required to be the defensive unit on the turn, and then he just doesn't dodge any of the attacks, and then you die. And you know, there are plenty of units in the game that are like that, where their main defensive ability is dodge rather than actually being able to tank hits. But it's always super disappointing when you're doing well in a run and then the defensive unit who needs to dodge doesn't dodge, and then you lose. So Hirudegarn can be good. Like, he's on some okay teams. He's got some good links, but yeah, he's not that crazy, I think, compared to some of the other units. At his peak, this is the problem with rating a unit that is RNG, because at his peak, like I say, he's doing big damage and dodging basically everything. So then he's really good, because in theory, a unit that can dodge every single attack is probably one of the best units in the game, right? Because you never take damage apart from a disabled dodge event. So this guy, very hit or miss, but I think for me at number 9. Then at number 8, I have Physical Rose. Now, I've been a Physical Rose defender since day one. Obviously, when they buffed him with his passive update, that made him significantly better. And then obviously with the anniversary stuff, all the super bosses, buffs and everything, like this guy was in a really good spot. Now, in the current meta, the Extreme team has shifted more towards movie bosses with all the Broly stuff from the Worldwide Celebration. So it's a lot harder for this guy. Like, he fits on some of these other teams. Like, I believe he is on the Lord Slug team. I don't think he's on... Yeah, he's not on the 170, but he is on the Lord Slug team because he's on Inhuman Deeds. But his passive revolves around him being run with super bosses. So obviously, he can still be good. He's still very good on the Super Bosses team. I still think he is a very good unit, like at his peak, when he's doing a bunch of these attacks and everything. I do think he's really good. I think he's underrated. But in the current meta, the Super Bosses team isn't really one of the big teams anymore. So he's actually a unit that, despite, like I say, I've been a defender since day one, I can't say the last time I actually used him, because I'm not sure the last time I really properly used like the super bosses team. So that's a little bit disappointing, but I do think he's good. And like I say, on the best team build, I would say that he is better, like his performance. He is definitely better to me than Hirudegarn and the Scout of Vegeta and Frieza. So he settles into the list here at number 8. I could see him potentially higher if Super Bosses gets more buffs and things like that again. Or like maybe Corroded Body and Mind Team gets some buffs. But that doesn't change the fact that he needs Super Bosses allies. And in total, he needs to have 5 of them. One of them is him. So that means on the team, you have to have 4 other Super Bosses characters, which gives you a slot for 1 non-Super Boss on the team. And everyone less than that, you're losing out on 6% damage reduction, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it adds up to a solid amount, right? So he currently is at number 8. Then at number 7, I have the Dragon Fist Goku. I think this guy might be a little bit higher than some people would have expected. I should say as well, I should have mentioned at the beginning, like I don't look at other people's tier lists or anything like that, right? So I do try and base this entirely on my own experience with the game. I don't know if people will think that this guy's too high. I think, you know, maybe it's even like recency bias, but to the opposite direction, right? That Vegeta is so low for me because I think he's such a disappointment. Would people argue that the Fireworks Vegeta is better than this Goku? I don't know. Movie Heroes or Final Trump Card with Super Saiyan 3 or Kamehameha is probably a better team. Well, I guess Vegeta's team does have like a lot of the Vegeta family units and stuff because he has Gifted Warriors, so he has a lot of the other Vegetas. But like this guy can be really, really good. I think people underrated him since his release as well, because I originally only had 1 dupe in this guy, and he is dropping really high attack stats, and then in slot 2 has a 70% chance to dodge, but has high enough raw defense that he can tank normals relatively well. Obviously, as bosses have gotten harder since his release, because he is almost a year old at this point. You know, he's starting to tank not as well against the hardest hitting bosses. And then of course his standby can be really, really good. It can be hit or miss, of course, because you activate his standby, transform into the like waiting for the enemy to attack Dragon Fist mode, and then of course that gives you the scouter for that turn, so you can put him in front of where the super attack is, but it doesn't give you any sort of like pre-warning. So one of the things that can happen quite regularly, which is super annoying, I guess in difficult events it's not as common because the bosses do super attack so much, but I have had a couple of different experiences in the videos that I've done with this guy since he released, where you go ahead and pop his active skill and the enemy isn't supering you on that turn. So I think something that would have been really good for him, I don't know if that would be OP, but like one of the things that would have been really good for him would be to have the ability to have the scouter, or like when his active skill was available to be used, so you'd know whether to use it or not. And then obviously, you know, for most people who don't care about that kind of thing, I try to not to do it in videos, but obviously if you do use his active skill and the enemy's not supering you, you can just close the app and reopen it and then not use his active skill. But I guess that's one of those things that technically for people who are just trying to play the game, just trying to beat tough events, or there's like a specific category mission you're trying to do or something like that, there isn't really any reason not to do that. But it's one of those things that is kind of like gaming the system a little bit, so I try not to do it for videos or challenge runs specifically. But the fact that he has that guaranteed super counter, and then he 100% dodges everything after countering the super, the only time he can really let you down is he still has the 70% chance to dodge, but until the enemy does do a super, if he misses that 70% dodge chance, he can take a lot of damage, even from normals, from these tough bosses. So that's one letdown for him. It's probably the only reason why I don't have him higher on the list, because I do think he is really good. And like I said, I think he's underrated, but 7 is where we have him on the list at the moment. So then we go on to number 6, and for number 6 I have Roshi. Now the next 2 units I think are a really good example of ones that could be swapped around. Especially because when it comes to the next unit, I don't actually even have them. So my experience with them has been as a friend, and then obviously checking out like videos and stuff. I said at the beginning, I don't base my opinion off of other people's showcases, but like when I don't have the unit, there's not much else I can do, right? So Roshi is a unit that I don't have, but have used as a friend, tried him out in a bunch of different showcases. I've talked about him because obviously he only recently came out on Global, so I've given my thoughts on him quite extensively in recent videos. But if you haven't seen those, like, he's a very solid unit. His performance is good. He's not anything like, I think, super busted, but he's definitely good. He's just one of those units that you really don't need to have, right? Like, his leader skill and his team is interesting, but can be built under other leaders, right? Like, one of the optimal builds, because he leads Turtle School, which has most of the Gokus in the game, you can build a team that has, like, you know, AGL UI and Tech UI. But then it's like, if you're going to use that team build, why are you not just running a Reps of Universe 7 team, right? And this guy supports Turtle School and Peppy Gal, so you can have him as a floating support, which means that the double UI Goku rotation will be getting a nice chunk of support from him. But, like I say, you just run the Reps of Universe 7 team and have, like, that team full of crazy LRs instead of this guy. And obviously he gets a lot of buffs if you have Peppy Gal's allies in the same turn, or the Bulma, which obviously is his banner unit. They did give a new release Bulma that was pretty good. So overall, he's very solid, but I just don't think he massively excels in any real areas, right? Like, he has things like built-in additional supers. He does have some damage reduction, although some of it wears off after 7 turns. So his defensive abilities aren't, like, super busted. So in difficult events, especially if you get past 7 turns, he can be getting caught out by supers or really big damaging normals. So yeah, I mean, this guy is good, but, like, again, I didn't want to underrate him just based on the fact that I haven't used him a lot. Like, there would be a part of me that would want to put Dragon Fist Goku above him, especially because in this form, I think he's really good. Like, he hits harder than Roshi, I think, unless Roshi has, like, the full Peppy Gals and one of them is a Bulma rotation. But this guy hits really hard, has a 70% chance to dodge, and then I think their raw defense is not super far away, again, unless Roshi has, like, that full crazy buff turn. So yeah, I'm really not sure. I mean, I could, if you think that Dragon Fist Goku is better than Roshi, maybe I could see that. I mean, personally, I enjoy using him more, but that's just based on the team builds I like to use and stuff, right? With all the crazy forms of Power Beyond Super Saiyan, like 3, Blue, God, etc. But I mean, this guy is a solid unit. I think he deserves to be in the upper part of the list at least. So he does come in at number 6 here, because the unit at number 5 is going to be Physical Topo. And this is the other unit that I say I don't have this guy. So I've based this off of my experience using him as a friend, and also looking at what his team brings to the game, right? Because like I say, with Roshi, you don't really need Roshi to build a team of, like, Gokus for Turtle School or Peppy Gals, like, you know, with Vidal's EZA and stuff like that. Whereas this guy, like, the Special Pose team or like a Universe 11 team, is really difficult to run without this guy, and is a team that doesn't really have a lot of units available. So if you're missing this guy, we talked about this when we did the Margarita EZA showcase recently, like, you really need to have all of the top ticket, like, Universe 11 units in order to build a really good Universe 11 team. And then this guy is really, really good. He obviously has the entrance animation, he guards and has damage reduction well, the guard is for a few turns, right? And then he is able to give support to the allies on the team. He gets extra defense after he gets hit. He guards as the first attacker in the turn. And then obviously once you transform, he then becomes the God of Destruction Topo, where he can do a lot of damage. He starts off with a solid amount of damage reduction and then slowly loses it as he gets hit, which is an interesting mechanic. There's definitely the argument for him being, like, full dodge, so that he's not getting hit and not losing the damage reduction, like, as much. But he can hit really hard, can be decent defensively. Like, Topo is just a really good unit, and from what I've seen from him personally, numbers-wise, defense mechanics-wise, I would say he is better than Roshi. And then potentially, like, in his best-case scenario, he probably is better than Dragon Fist Goku in his best-case scenario. So I think him being at number 5 here is probably about right. So then we go on to number 4. Number 4, we have the Int Fat Boo. Now, Int Fat Boo is an interesting unit because even from his release, I would say it's hard to rate this guy, because there are times when he can be like an absolute god. Gets a bunch of supers in one turn. His post-super defense is really, really good. He can have guard, obviously. But he also has the revival, which has the annoying sort of condition where it's only him that can get killed to get the revival. And in slot 1, he can take a lot of damage, but he's in one of those units, he's in a weird spot where some events when he came out, like he wouldn't quite take enough damage in slot 1, but would still take a lot of damage. And then he wouldn't die, someone else would die, so then you lose. Or obviously you can go into difficult events now, get immediately killed in slot 1 on turn 1, get the revival, but then it means that like the int fat boo on the next turn, if you're running his team specifically, is then going to potentially be a liability and you've already used your revival. But then once you do get this guy going, he's really good. Like he stacks up his defense really quickly. You can get a lot of healing. He has the survive KO attacks thing. So depending on like how the rotation plays out, that can be useful. And then obviously he does have the good condition where it's him or another ally reviving, gives him his buff, which is where you can use the active skill. You get guaranteed guard regardless of your HP, as well as an additional super attack. And then, yeah, the active skill can be used early if he's been the one that revives. And the active skill is a Ghost Usher, changes all the field to Candy, which obviously he then heals with as well. So this guy's really, really good. And the Boo team is really good. Like his leader skill, not just the Boo Saga, like all the actual Boo units that got buffed during Golden Week, but Boo Saga, Sworn Enemies and Storied Figures is a pretty good setup for a team. And Boo is really, really good. I just think the reason he's not any higher on the list at the moment is where he is in the current meta and how much damage he takes from some of these enemies. I don't know. I think there's an argument that you could switch him and the next unit around because they are very similar units, but I think maybe it just comes down to personal preference. So to jump straight over to number 3, we have the Tech Saiyan Day Vegeta. Now, his team has gotten a lot of buffs. Obviously, he was a unit that when he came out for Saiyan Day, global players, we already knew what was going to be coming for the anniversary. So we knew that his team was going to get a lot of buffs from the anniversary, right? Broly and Gogeta both being on the Super Saiyans team. So we knew this guy was going to get a ton of buffs. And then, of course, we got the Blue Evolution Vegeta EZA during the anniversary, which is a really good buff for his team. The banner unit King Vegeta is actually still pretty solid, especially if you're going up against like an STR boss, he could definitely still be usable. And yeah, he's just very, very good. Overall solid unit. He does build up, he is a stacking unit, so he is of course not as good in like shorter events that hit really hard straight away. I think one of the first big events that really kind of started to be a bit difficult for him was the Cell Max Stage 2, because it hits so hard like right from the start. And so obviously events that are built to be that way, like the new Janemba and Gogeta stage, can be quite difficult for him as well. But any events where he gets a little bit of a chance to start building up, he does stack up quite quickly and he can be very, very good. So I really like this guy. His team gets buffed fairly regularly because Vegeta Family, whilst we don't see as many Vegeta Family releases, Super Saiyans is obviously a category that does get buffs pretty regularly, and will continue to in the future, of course. And then Vegeta Family, every now and then we will get some interesting buffs. Remember that for heroes, we are going to get the Xeno Vegeta EZA this year, and he is a Vegeta Family support. Same with the Goku, and who is a Goku Family support. So if those guys get really good EZAs, then they're probably going to end up being like must-run units on their family teams. So this Vegeta Family team is going to get another significant buff. So definitely looking forward to seeing those. So this guy is at number 3 for me. Like I said, I could definitely see, if you want to make an argument that Int Boo is better than him, I probably wouldn't disagree too strongly. Like I said at the beginning, if units are next to each other on a tier list, for me, I probably am not going to have huge arguments for switching them around, because they're already so close as it is anyway, and only one little detail here or there could be the reason why a unit was put above the other one. So if you wanted to swap this guy and Int Vegeta, I think that would be perfectly acceptable. But for me, and the teams I like to run, how I like to play the game, I have him at number 3. And so number 2, this is where we see the entry for the latest Dokkan Fest exclusive Lord SLUG. I think this guy is really, really good. As soon as I saw his kit, I thought he was good. His team is very interesting. Demonic Power is an interesting new category, which is obviously going to get a lot of buffs potentially going forwards with all the stuff that's going to be coming out for Daima. And then, of course, the heroes, not only EZAs, but new units, all the Demon Realm characters that are from heroes that will be on demonic power or are on demonic power, and then the new ones who will be. Like, his team is really good, his team is really fun, has a lot of good options, and he is really good. Like, his domain is good, it activates nice and early, so it can still interact well with the other domains in the game, depending on which ones you want to use. And then, yeah, he's got solid damage reduction, 66%. He builds up his own stats by attacking, and he builds up relatively quickly. Like, my 55% one, I've had, like, on turns where he's starting off at over 600k defense start of turn. He's still raising defense when he super attacks, and then he has 66% damage reduction, like, on top of that. So I've seen him tank some incredibly hard hitting attacks, even with my one being 55%. So I think he is very, very impressive. Very good buff for extreme. Like, he is just the complete opposite of Vegeta. I made a video that went up earlier today, if you haven't seen it, going over, like, all the details of, like, what the heck happened going from the worldwide and all those crazy units to getting Scout of Vegeta and how much of a disappointment he feels like, and then getting this guy as the next unit after Scout of Vegeta, and he's really, really good. So it's definitely almost like whiplash with the how these units, like, we went from super good in the worldwide to Scout of Vegeta, and then to this guy back to being a TUR that I consider to be one of the best TURs in the game. So certainly a very interesting scenario for the TURs releasing recently. And so, of course, you could probably guess at this point, one of the only units that you would probably expect to see high up in a tier list that we haven't mentioned so far is the AGL Super Saiyan 3 Angel Goku. Now, this guy not only was super, super good on release, I think I might have, when I did the tier list when he came out, I think I had him at number 1. Which is funny to think that we've had so many big LRs released during the year. The top 10 TURs list doesn't change like a huge amount. I mean, bear in mind for my list, and it might just be for me personally, I still have the New Year Dual Dokkan Fest on here. So the top 10 TURs still has TURs that were released a year ago. And that's not necessarily because they're super crazy good. It's obviously like Arudagon's quite low on that list. But it seems like we've gotten a lot of LRs recently and not as many TURs. But this guy, really, really good. Obviously, turn 1, as long as you get his entrance animation, which you only have to have a Boo Saga ally on the team, which is a lot easier now. Like, not only did the Boo Saga obviously get a ton of buffs during this celebration, but we just got the STR Family Kamehameha Gohan from the Worldwide celebration. And for whatever weird reason Dokkan does with the superclass characters from that movie, but not the Brolys for some reason, that Gohan is on Majin Buu Saga. So we've got another new, very meta-relevant, like one of the better units in the game, who is a Buu Saga ally, who can therefore activate this guy's entrance animation. And so turn 1, really good tank. Then he loses a little bit of damage reduction, but he's building it up with each super that he gets. He has a way to get built-in additionals. So, like, on turn 1, by the time he's attacked, he usually gets at least 1 additional. So with each attack that he's doing, you get that buff. On turn 1, he usually, after attacking, is then at over 100% damage reduction, because he started from 90. If he attacks twice, he goes up to 100. If he's in slot 2 or 3, he can get another chance to do another extra super. And so then when you get to his next turn, he's lost a little bit of extra damage reduction. But again, by the time he's attacked, especially if he ends up doing 3 attacks, he's still up at around that sort of like 80 to 90% damage reduction level, which means he tanks really, really well. Now, obviously in longer events, it can start to be a little bit more dangerous for him, but he has the active skill, which you can use, which not only does damage, but of course gives him the on super buff part of his passive, so he's got a bit more defense, so he can still kind of be in slot 1 on that turn. But realistically, like, once you get to that point where his damage reduction is starting to drop off completely, because I think it can't go any lower than him having the build-up that he gets from his supers, right? The 90% he gets from his passive, he can lose all of that, but obviously his supers he can build up to having 30%. So he's still going to have 30% at the bare minimum, as long as you've gotten 6 supers by the time the intro damage reduction wears out. But that's obviously a perfectly fine amount. Once he's supered and got relatively good raw defense, having 30% damage reduction is good. Probably doesn't save him from like the hardest hitting super attacks, but at that point you're going to be quite far into the event. He does do a lot of damage, so helps to like end the events a bit quicker. So yeah, This guy really, really good, and in my opinion, still the best Dokkan Fest exclusive TUR. Bearing in mind, of course, as I said at the beginning, and as we always do with these lists, we are not including units that have easy A's. I'm not sure how that would change up the list. I mean, it definitely would affect it, especially the lower parts of the list. But I always like to look at the non-easy A's and do easy A's as their own tier list. So potentially we could do another one of those soon. I might wait until we see who the main easy A for the SLUG celebration is before I do that. But at the moment, I have this guy at number 1. So if we switch over to the actual tier maker list, so you can see here they are listed 1 to 10, I guess with the honorable mention of Frieza. I still can't decide whether I think Frieza is better than Vegeta. I'm just so disappointed with Vegeta. So at 10, we have either Frieza or the Dirty Fireworks Vegeta. 9 is Sarudagan, 8 Physical Rose, 7 STR Dragon Fist Goku, 6 STR Roshi, 5 Physical Topo, 4 Int Fat Buu, 3 Tech Vegeta, 2 STR Lord Slug, and 1 Super Saiyan 3 Angel Goku. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Like I said at the beginning, if you disagree at all, do let me know. Let me know what you would swap around, or just let me know your full personal top 10 list. But like I say, give me some reasons if you think some of these placements are wrong. I'm happy to discuss them in the comments, but I don't bother really replying to comments that are just like, you're wrong, like kind of thing, right? Because it's fun to have discussions about units, but yeah, let's give me something to work with, right, in the comments if you're going to disagree with me. So let me know what you think down below in the comment section. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.